Hi everybody, Giselle Grenier here from ArtPlace.ca. In today's video I'm going to create a fun little, I'm going to say background, but I think it's going to be a bit more detailed. I know what I want to do, and what I should do is stop at the stencil part, but you'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, so I'm using a piece of the Strathmore Wind Power mixed media paper. It's the 400 series. I had it in a big sheet, and for another project I cut it out at 8.5 by 11, and then I have the leftover piece, which is what's here. And this is going to fall down. And then I've primed it with gesso using a number 8 bristle brush, and just to save some time. And I've got some stencils here. Now this one here I actually cut to fit in my stencil binder. And it's this big long stencil. This is an Americana stencil from DecoArt. It's called Kaleidoscope Border, and I'm going to be using this part here. I have a Andy Skinner stencil, and this is Sunburst. And my favorite little birdie stencil called Finch. And I'm going to be using it on this side though. Alright, so what we're going to do is I've got some brushes already laid out. They're damp. The paints, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to need more or not going to use all of these, so we'll see what happens. Transparent red iron oxide, transparent yellow iron oxide, derelid yellow, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and interference blue. And white. I'm missing white. White. Oopsie. So I've got that. All right. So this is fairly rough, which is fine. And I was contemplating stenciling some book paper on here, which I thought would be really cool. And I thought, yeah, no, I'm going to wait and see what happens. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to apply a layer of derelid yellow to the entire piece. Nice transparent layer. Okay, so half a dot would have been enough. Might as well just cover everything. And because the paint, other than, see, they forgot to put the transparency on here. I'm noticing that on some of the bottles, the transparency hasn't been put on. This is burnt sienna. I believe what this is opaque. These are all either transparent or semi-transparent. Titanium white's opaque. So because we're using more transparent colors and thin layers, that this yellow will come through the painting. And when I do that, I gotta be careful so I don't get this in my face. I did that this morning. I was cutting my lemon to squeeze into some warm water, and I had the knife, and then I went to scratch my head. Yeah, Joe just looked at me and said, oh, okay. So that's drying fairly quickly because it's so warm. And what we're going to do, so while that's drying, I'm going to be applying a stencil to this. But I'm not really going to paint the stencil per se. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be subtracting color. So we've got the yellow on here. Okay, I'm going to be putting the transparent red iron oxide over here, put the stencil on right away, and then I'm going to rub out. And what's going to be left over are these little yellow sunbursts coming through the paper. Okay, just going to get a paper towel, and I'm just going to wipe off any excess. And it's important that the paper be gessoed for this. That way the paper just doesn't suck in all the paint. Or, you know what, try and see what happens if you don't prime it. And this I have to do fairly quickly so it doesn't dry. Yeah, that should be alright. Have that ready. And I can use the same brush . And if I get some on the back, it doesn't bother me. We're going to be darkening the edges anyways. That's fine. nice and rough. And I'm going to put, now I have to decide, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to do it like that. I was hoping to get a little bit more in there. Yeah, right about there. Baby wipe or kitchen wipe. Rub, rub, rub. And it's one of the reasons why it's important to gesso the paper, because if you do this on unprimed paper, you might actually tear the paper. You just have to try it and see what happens if you don't have any gesso. You can also use white acrylic paint. Gesso is something you should have in your arsenal though, because you can find so many different uses for it. Go. Clean the stencil right away. And if I didn't have chaos in the room, I'd have my Tupperware container next to me filled with water. I just put the stencils right in that Tupperware container with the water, and or plastic container, it's not Tupperware, and that way the paint doesn't have time to dry. That was actually fairly easy. So there we go. I like how some of the water from the baby wipe got underneath. And got a little bit of a distressed look. Now let's see, can we remove it a little bit more? Let's see what happens. Oh yeah. So you can, and this is possible because of the gesso. My fingerprint right there. I don't need no stinking DNA in here. Just getting a little bit, I want a little bit more of that yellow to shine through. So let's see if we just do it like that, and I'm thinking right around here. Then you'll be able to pick up all the brush strokes as well, which I love. Some people hate seeing brush strokes. You want, do what, it's your art. Do whatever you want. I happen to love seeing it, especially when it's random like that. So this took it right down to almost the gesso. The longer you let the baby wipe sit, the more that's going to come up. There we go. Love that. Love that. And now we're going to, so this is going to be a twofold. We're going to stencil this twice. So I'm looking at putting that right there. And so right there. Now I'm going to make up a black, chromatic black. I'm going to start off with equal parts of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And I'm going to grab a little round brush and mix that up. When you use black out of the tube, bottle, whatever you want to call it, it's really flat and kind of harsh. Or I like making my own black. But because it's so hard to see, you need to test it. And of course I have my color journal on the wall. Sorry about that. Started off starting a new color mixing book. And we want to add a speck of white to that to see the true underlying color. There we go. So that's a really nice neutral. I want to have a little bit more blue in that. So what it's going to be is roughly 2 parts of ultramarine blue to 1 part burnt sienna, which will give you something close to Payne's gray. If you have Payne's gray, you are more than welcome to use that instead of making your own black. Oh, Mia's coming for a visit. There we go. That is perfect. That's what I'm looking for. That's perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to stencil this. Now I need a dry brush. I'm going to get... I'm going to use... Come on. Yes, I should have had this ready. Where's my dome? Here it is. I want the little dome brush. I'm going to pick up some paint, pounce off, remove the excess, and I'm going to start from the outside and I work my way in. We're going to make this pretty opaque, but we can't just slap on a whole bunch of paint. So we're going to do this very slowly. And this stencil is one of my most used stencils. So I'm going to have to get my fingers in there and just do some fancy hand yoga. So I'm thinking with this, I'm probably looking at about 3 or 4 layers. And you'll understand why I want this to be pretty opaque. In the real world, I would have just freehanded this and just painted it from scratch. And now what I can do, you gotta be very careful with this. I'm gonna quickly just dry that and lift it off. What you end up doing with that is you end up sealing the paint into the stencil, okay? And you may also run the risk of melting the plastic if your heat gun's too hot. I only did it for a few seconds. And shape stencils like this, I don't worry about the paint being stuck to it because I like how it creates some extra little shapes and stuff like that. And bristles are coming out. These brushes I think are getting close to time to be replaced. Now if you've got time, you're going to apply your 1 layer, then you can take the stencil off and put it back down. You have to be bang on though. You have to be so precise. And now I'm going to hold the corners. I'm going to lift it up. That part's okay. The birdie still needs another layer. I'm going to pounce that. I can get a thicker coverage if I pounce it. But I like the little bit of the transparency. So there's going to have to be a compromise there. Do I want the opacity or do I want the transparency? So I'm going to split the difference. There we go. All right, and let me quickly just wipe this down, which, to be honest with you, isn't going to be so necessary because the stencil's in rough shape. Just going to put it into my color mixing book just to wipe off the paint on here. Just to show you what happens. You can use this technique. Oops. For leftover paint. And just, sometimes you'll never know what happens. Sometimes you never know what happens. All right, put that aside. Bring that back. And I'm going to take that brush again. Actually, I was going to extend the branch, but I'm thinking, no, I'm going to extend the branch. But I'm going to show you, when you extend the branch, it's going to need to be as opaque as that, but what you can do is bring the brush in, actually into the piece, and that way it's consistent. And I could just add little extra things to it. If the paint overlapped, I can add another piece in there. See, this is the part where I was going to wait till phase 2, because this is more the painting part. Now see how I'm brushing, the paint's not going down here? That's because the paint hasn't dried and I'm just lifting it up. So I have to just sit and wait, or hit it with a heat gun. Doesn't take long. And then apply another layer. So I'm just going to make sure that I have different transparency levels in here. And you don't have to do this, you can if you want. And I'm good with that. And the birdie is dry. So this is the part that's a bit challenging. Just going to hit that again. A water droplet was there. Look what happened. Does that matter? Nah. Let's see what happens. Now what I want to do is I want to take the stencil, and I only want to get some circle dots into the actual bird. So in order to do that, let's see if I just want to do that. I can do this, and then I can take the stencil and go back over like that, or, bless you, Chaos, or lay the stencil this way and put the circle dots on top. So you can do that as well. Doesn't matter. And I'm going to use the interference blue, and I'm going to use the actual brush to put this on. Way too much water. So you want your brush to be fairly dry. And you know what else you can use? Of course, I probably don't have any. Oh, here we go. A Q-tip. That's even better than using a brush. So I don't know if this will actually be strong enough to show an actual interference color. It's more of the reflection. I don't know if it's going to be enough, but we're all about experimenting. And I'm just going to put a little bit on the beak. Okay, so that's going to have to dry. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that excess. That's way too much. There we go. Just going to touch up do some final touch-ups. The stencil went off the paper. Whoops. Oh, stencil went off the paper. I still had the stencil on there. Jesus. Oh. Yeah, I'm calling myself a few names right now. And okay, so if we just take the Q-tip, oh, I don't have to use a stencil. And let's see what happens if we put some up here. So this would be like the reflection of the sun on these little fantasy, this little fantasy tree. And we'll see what happens with that. Okay, we don't have to wait to continue working on it, which I even love even more. I'm going to take some transparent red iron oxide and a dry number 8 Bristle Bright. And I'm just going to age the edges. This works best because it's transparent. Oh, and have a baby wipe handy, just in case you put a bit too much on there. Let me get a close-up here. There we go. I missed my remote control for my camera, my video camera. I'm going to age this part. That's dry. You can do this if you want. If not, you can see why I was hesitating on using this one for a book of backgrounds, because I did so much stenciling. And actually, I think I'm not going to bother using it as a book of backgrounds. I'll just post it the way it is. Because really, I mean, I'm sure you can figure out something to do on this for further designs. You can add some words to it. I think I was off camera there, I'm sorry. And I'm going to even age the darken the sun area a little bit around the edges. Just kind of contains everything, avoiding the interference area. And then once I've gone a whole pass around, I will start again. And you can rinse and repeat this as often as you want. Ideally let each layer dry. See how nice and dark that is. And the dark patch there, I think it was lacking some gesso. So in keeping that this isn't going to be a book of backgrounds, I'm going to take this little number 1 liner, and I'm going to take a little bit of the chromatic black, a speck of white to turn it into a gray, and I'm just going to put a little bit of a circle right there. Oh my god, that's not even close to being. Acrylics will dry a little bit darker, so I'm gonna have to make things a little bit lighter. A bit of highlight there, and I can also just put a few little lines in here. You don't have to do that. Be interesting when that dries, the interference colors, what that's going to look like. And then I'm going to take white and a touch at the top. There we go. That brush has some rogue hairs I'll have to trim off. There we go. So we'll wait and see what happens with this when it's dry and see what it looks like. And I would say with this, I'm looking at about, there's a big one there, I'm thinking maybe about 15 minutes. So it's dry, and then when I was cleaning stuff up, I got some water on here and the paint lifted off. So I'm not so much a fan of the interference, the way that showed up, so I'm going to just apply a transparent layer of that chromatic black. It's not so much the interference, it's the shapes. It's not what I was going for. So this will just help tone it down. You can do this if you want. So this may end up now being a background because I can use it for something else. I'm thinking collaging some papers might turn out well. There we go. Okay, so note to self on this is that you need to take your stuff and put it away when you're cleaning your table. I splashed some water onto the piece, didn't notice it, and the water just sat there, and then when I blotted it up, the paint came up. Now these layers are transparent. If you wanted this to be completely opaque, you can go with black or just paint multiple layers. That's what I'm going to end up doing. I like the interference, but not for what I just did. But that actually doesn't look too bad. So that's it. So I would love to see your take on it. If you don't have interference, don't worry about it. Use metallics, use whatever you want. And I absolutely love circles, which is why I thought this would be kind of cool, but I think the Q-tips just made it a little bit too harsh. So I'm going to keep putting on a few more layers until these become less obvious. And I would love to see what you've done. So feel free to share it with me, or better yet, join our private Facebook group and share in there. We'd love to feed off each other's ideas for inspiration. So I'm going to go and dry this and continue applying a few more layers. And then I will see you in the next video. So until then, stay inspired.